Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Ahlan wa sahlan, brother. So nice to see you.
And it's very pleasant to see you. You know, blessed, Ramadan. I pray your fast is going well and Allah is blessing us in this month of Ramadan. My name is Imam.
Let me introduce you, my friend,
yes.
my brother. Let me introduce you.
Yes.
You are Imam Abdul-Aleem, Muhammad Abdul-Aleem, who presents a clear understanding of the Holy Quran. You're one of the outstanding imams in this country, and I'm really honored to be
honored to have you think that.
And what I like about you is your understanding of the Holy Quran and the Quranic Arabic language. You teach imams. You're a teacher of the Muslim American community. You come from Philadelphia, but your influence is way beyond that. You could tell us about your masjid in a second.
Yes.
And you support the religious and social initiatives that are taken by the late Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, who, by the way, supported KARAMAH on a very important issue, controversy. And we're very thankful for that. And I will just mention it had to do with the Supreme Court freeze and leave that for another time. So who was uplifting the humanity and promoting human excellence through his teachings. You served as the resident imam of Masjidullah in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, from 1982 to 2001, I believe. And you currently serve as a visiting guest lecturer at the mosques throughout the country. So you travel quite a bit, although I must say during this era of coronavirus, you must be staying with the family, which would be
staying with the family and using social media to travel.
Right.
We still travel, but we don't have to physically go.
So you do it you travel from home. It's a little bit like the 1,000 Nights and One Night stories.
Yes.
You also serve as the Imam Emeritus at the Masjidullah, and you have been recognized by various civic and charitable organizations for your leadership and your scholarship. And I want to add that I was with you on a delegation that you headed last year to Morocco by invitation of the Ministry of Awqaf to visit Morocco's Islamic schools and masajid. And that was, I believe, a very valuable experience.
Yes, let me say, Bismillah, let me say in respect to that, one of the things that we really were interested in that trip, I want to share with you is that Morocco has always been one of the nations of Muslims that our leader Imam Muhammad felt that we should work hard to form good relationships with, because they share some of the same values that we have. I mean, in terms of respect for the human being, development of Islamic and business opportunities.
Moderation.
Right. Yes, very, very important. So when the opportunity was presented to lead a delegation of imams and educators to Morocco, we took that because we wanted to make sure that relationship remains strong. Because as you and I both are well aware that many of the Muslim nations are going through a lot of social and political upheaval, where Morocco had been relatively stable and forward-thinking for many, many, many years. So this particular trip enable us to, first of all, to reaffirm that bond that we have had with Morocco for many years. But like any relationship, if you don't exercise it, you lose it. So the opportunity came for us to travel with a delegation of imams, let's say imams and educators from the KARAMAH, which is Muslim women for Muslim women lawyers for human rights. And we felt that was an excellent meeting to go with that particular institute, because it itself also represents a lot of what we would consider the key issues of human life today. What is the role of Muslim women in the search for human rights and human excellence? And Morocco and KARAMAH both represent that expression, where we have the scholarship and the intellectual heritage of women contributing to the forward thinking of al-Islam. We wanted the community that's associated with Imam Muhammad, and Allah be pleased with him, to continue that, because we wanted not only our men to become more scholarly in their development, also wanted our women. So we looked, so going to Morocco afforded us the opportunity to see both for the whole family, opportunities to travel there, and also have an exchange between our two communities, Morocco and the Muslim American community of Imam Muhammad. So that trip was very, very.
I want to mention that also Clara Muhammad established quite a bunch of schools for Islamic education in the United States. Yes. And that is a great model to continue. And I remember when we went to visit the Islamic centers in Morocco, I almost had tears in my eyes seeing how many young little girls were reading the Quran. Yes, in big rows, enthusiastically learning the religion, and nobody is telling them that this is not something.
Exactly. Well, see, that's why I say that relationship is so important, because for us, education is a #1 focus. Because in order to preserve and advance the life of any community, you must make the learning an essential element, and the ones who are usually most responsible for this, it begins in the home. It begins with the mother, right? And as you mentioned, our dear beloved sister Clara Muhammad, that focus started with her and her sons and her children back in the 30s. You know, the whole idea of, say, homeschooling, was something that we were concerned about from our inception. And again, see, here we are, maybe 90 years, a little more since that time, having to now reach to a nation like Morocco, who has a much longer history, and one of the things that really touched my heart, not only seeing the young girls learning the Quran, but also the fact that many of the institutions were started by Muslim women who understood the value of not only primary education, but advanced education. And I thought that this would be an inspiration to many of our young women and our women in general, because to see that, a great part of the history of Islam is not highlighted, is that the great contribution that Muslim women have made to advanced education. So, it's one thing we talk about the mother teaching at home, but it's, to take it to that next, to the advanced, the university level, that has been a great inspiration to me and to many of the women known who traveled in the delegation. But as we came back and shared that with the women within the community, because this is the history that's not well known by the Muslims all over the world.
It's an interesting point you make, because as you know from our visit to Al-Qarawiyyin University, it was founded by a woman.
Founded by a woman, right? And it is the oldest university in the world. When you do your background study, you find that this particular university in Morocco, started by a woman, has the longest continuous educational development in the world. So Lord left this as a sign for us that this is a natural development that's been unchecked. It had not been aborted in any way. We wanted to bring that tradition to the Clara Muhammad school system here in America, because it takes a lot to establish a school. The finances, and having the right materials and the right teachers, and hopefully, God willing, as long as we keep striving and struggling, Allah will bless us. Maybe one day to have that type of legacy, where people look back 100 years, 200 years, and see how the Clara Muhammad school system struggled and developed and maintained itself through many periods of time, inshallah, God will.
And a lot of the graduates of the school really loved it. And they feel that it affected their life and directed them in the proper way. So I pray with you that this system will thrive and continue all over the country, inshallah.
Yes.
As Jamiat maybe it will become a university, develop a university at one time, just like University of Qarawiyyin. Who knows?
Yes, yes.
Well,
the opportunity. See, one of the blessed opportunities with the rise of al-Islam here in America is that these opportunities to bring the intellectual heritage of al-Islam here in the West, and for Muslims to take advantage of the freedom that we have here to do these things. There's nothing standing in our way except us. We have the heritage and the legacy. All we got to do is put the resources behind the heritage and the legacy.
Exactly. So the topic, we got launched into it before I even mentioned what it is, which is advancing our knowledge of Islam, challenges and opportunities. We spoke about the opportunities, we'll speak about the challenges, but I also wanted you to connect for me, how is the trip to Morocco useful besides just visiting and seeing? Do you see a way in which the knowledge there could help the knowledge here? Is there a bridge, or isn't there?
Yes, well, now in our topic is Islamic education. It underlines a lot of what our concern is, and not only education for our imams, but education also for our women teachers. As you know, in Morocco, they have both men and women in the learning of the sciences of Islam, the Quran and the Hadiths, etc. We were hoping that by establishing a strong relationship, that we can have an exchange where possibly we can have some of the young men and women, usually what I would hope for, like maybe young families, husband and wife, teens will come from America and travel to Morocco to advance their collective studies. And likewise, a husband and wife, young family would leave from Morocco to come help us, especially with, like, for example, one of the areas that we desperately need is a better grip of the Quranic Arabic. More of our, not only our imams, but the believers in general, they need to be more comfortable with the Quran. And that then opens up a whole nother world where volumes and volumes of Islamic knowledge that's contained in Arabic language will be available to us. So I'm saying that some type of exchange program on that level, educational level. But also, I think that what is needed from both sides is to look for business opportunities, because I say again, education requires a strong financial base. Our colleges, universities, schools in general struggle when education is not financed on the same level, say, as the military. Many nations, America included in this, spend more money on their military than they do on the human capital, the human development. So I'm hoping that we can have that type of exchange on those levels.
The African American community is more successful financially than many give it credit for. And there are also large donors who hopefully will be hearing this conversation and will be motivated to provide some seed money to develop whatever systems already are in existence and have a strategic plan for them to grow in the next 10 years, for example. That is very much doable from within the United States, although we have to be concerned now about the financial health of the country given the coronavirus. But God is great, and there will be ways, inshallah, to overcome the financial crisis.
Let me say this. One of the things that we have been very concerned with before the crisis and during the crisis, and inshallah after the crisis, that the African American Muslim community has an obligation to establish what we call sustainable forms of income for our institutions. All right, and that means by doing this, we see this time of the coronavirus, for example, as a resetting of American, really world, civilization economies around the world. if we could be and have a better view of how to not only just have
The
money.
the waqf.
Yes, we begin to develop those more. I mean,
Yeah.
focus on that because we do have individuals who have financial abilities to contribute more than what they have. But I think that it's like a man having resources and he only pays this month's bill. Well, he's back at zero at the time after he finished paying the bill.
Yeah.
But if he has a sustainable income, where we had investments, and since we live in a system of economics, and Islam supports the idea of a certain amount of say, personal wealth, as long as as we said in the masjid, you can be a millionaire or a billionaire. You still have to give 2.5% beyond your expenses. So, and 2.5 in zakat is better from a billion than from a million. So a well-invested individual can make a contribution that will make it sustainable. I think in the time we're at now, as the whole world economy goes through this readjustment, this is the time for the African American Muslim to see what resources we have internally. So when we sit down at the international table of Muslims from around the world, we are coming with something. We're not just coming with our hand out. We're coming because we have, as we talked about earlier, many of our men and women, some of, when it comes to academic skills, are well educated. But how much of that education is benefiting the Muslim community? And I think during this time of resetting of the world of human civilization, we have to examine that.
Let me mention something that might be useful for the people watching this video to know about.
Yes.
A few weeks ago, KARAMAH did a video on wills, Islamic wills, with one of our board members, and a distinguished attorney, Abd Awad, in which he explained how all this goes. And in it, as you know, in Islam, 1/3 of your will could be designated for charity.
Yes.
So this is another source where we can build a waqf. And maybe, the first year it's not too much money, the second year not too much, but it will add up. And then you have a waqf, and if you have a strategy along with it and a good investment strategy as well as a good educational strategy, then in a few years you will get to where you want to get. So I encourage people to go to the KARAMAH website and look or contact KARAMAH if the video is not on it, to find out where they can watch that video about how to do in a very simple way through technology on the internet a Islamically compliant will, and in which they could leave charity for whomever they please. But since we're talking about the schooling system, that's a good opportunity to mention it. But now let's go back to the crux of this interview, which is what is needed for Islamic education. There are a lot of people now on the internet who are teaching Islam or talking about Islam and spreading messages in very highly watched series or videos. How do we distinguish the knowledgeable from the political, from the populist? What is the foundation of Islamic knowledge?
Well, to answer your question succinctly, is that the knowledge base of Islam is the Quran and the Quranic based traditions of our Prophet, so present peace be upon him. All right, but especially the Quran, because Allah says He protects the Quran, all right, and it has been unchanged throughout its history. There's no variation in terms of what an ayah is. It's all from Allah, not some good, some bad. So I think that, once again, I think the challenge for people today, especially with so many people on our social media, is to see how much of what is being presented is based in a Quranic argument, not in like I said, many people are very articulate very charismatic, but that's not enough today. All right, people are looking for guidance, and the only pure guidance is the words of Allah in the Quran, and not just a superficial understanding of the words, but a deep and a very sincere desire to understand how to apply the Quranic insights to today's environment. The internet has become a marketplace of ideas. You can pick this, pick that, pick that. But if you don't have someone giving you a Quranic base in how they are expressing their ideas, it's just their opinion. And as you know, them is just what people imagine. They can imagine different things, but it has to be rooted in the Quran.
How can I root it in the Quran if I am an American citizen who reads the Quran through the various commentaries and translations of the meanings of the Quran? And sometimes these translations are so different from each other. What does the Quran really say? Or maybe I should not be too worried about, some people say, the exact wording. I will just believe spiritually in the message.
No. Well, I think that's why we must insist on people having at least a fundamental knowledge of the Quranic Arabic. It's not enough to read a translation. We have an expression that we use in our community. People must get off the plantation of translation. See, because in the translation is a limitation of the thinking of the translator.
Yeah.
I mean, we must trust. If one is to really fully understand the Quran, he or she must make an effort. As the Prophet has said us, that to make an effort to learn how to recite the Quran. If you do it with ease, you get one barakah. If you do it with difficulty, you get two barakah, two blessings. So it's critical, especially in this day and time, for the Muslim leaders especially, and for the general popular also, but for the leaders especially, that we are not relying on translation, because every year, in fact, I get people to send me copies of their translations. I mean, and since about maybe 1990, it's been hundreds of translations, and we have to be careful that many of the translators are direct people to Islam as a spiritual system rather than a life system. Let me explain the difference. As the spiritual system, you're only concerned with spirituality and the good feeling you get by just hearing the words of the Quran and the Maloney's recitation. But as the life system, you try to understand what is the reason and application and the thinking process that one must have to apply the Quran in its universality. I'll give you, for example, as you know, in today's environment, when people go out, they're encouraged to wear masks. Right? Now, but the mask, they said, protects not the person wearing the mask, but people that you come in contact with. Yeah. Now, Islam has a concept called taqwa. Taqwa is being cautious, being mindful of God, being sensitive to how you treat other people. And the taqwa is a rich meaning, but it means cautious. So one can see that if we are applying Quranic concept, this wearing the mask is a form of taqwa. So therefore I can see that as a Muslim, I can see the need to encourage people to wear the mask because it falls in line with a concept that's in the Quran. Now the Quran doesn't say wear a mask when you go out, but the Quran talks about how Ramadan is to learn taqwa. The Quran is a book that gives guidance for those who have taqwa. So
and caring for each other. We have the morality of Islam.
Yeah. So once you have these, understanding of the broad concepts, you can then apply it to specific things that are happening in the life of the human being today, and that then makes Islam relevant. It makes Islam able to continue to be guided. See, let me explain something. When a person says that his book is guidance, then you can't follow someone and be guided them. Very important. Islam, the Quran comes to lead humanity to more well-balanced human life, to guide us to that. Now, that means we're following the Quran. We're not following Western technology or Eastern mysticism. We're following the well-balanced guidance of the Quran. But in order to do that, we must know the critical issues that the Quran and Islam comes to address. If
so does that really require us to know a little bit about what the fuqaha have said in the past or currently? Is understanding usul al-fiqh or fiqh important, or just a general knowledge of reading the Arabic?
No, I think it's important. When we look at the history, when Islam was the leading civilization, it was the civilization of ascension. You have to ask yourself, well, what were the things that made al-Islam, made the Quran the motivator for human excellence?
Yes.
And if you ask that question, you're obligated to go back and look at the early thinkers, because the early thinkers, they were practicing that type of independent thinking to come up with a direction for the human life. And we need to reacquaint ourselves with that, so that we can bring many of those methodologies, not necessarily the exact solutions, but the solutions then are different from what they are now. But the methodologies are true then and they're true now. So it's imperative that we be familiar with the processes of thinking and application that were exercised by the early thinkers in al-Islam, and then they were not limited to just accepting something without doing the type of deep study where each one could commit him or herself to its application. Because that's the key. See, if you just are reading the Quran for just a spiritual exercise, there's no commitment to try to live it. But when you're reading it for how can I apply it, you have to look at how the early Islamic thinkers, how they studied the Quran to make human society better.
You know, it's interesting that the times that Islam was really contributive in a great way to human civilization was the time when Muslim thinkers were actively thinking about not only how to apply the Quran to the world of even technology, right?
Yeah.
In our religion, there is no contradiction between technology and faith. To the contrary, the Quran says, look into the world and you'll see my ayat, my miracles. But also, it was very important to have that intellectual activity in understanding the deeper messages of the Quran. What is it telling us? It's known that every time you read a certain surah, you come up with different messages and different understanding because it is rich in a variety of ways. I think that kind of rationality that is important to development of society is referred to in the Quran repeatedly when it says, أَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ, which, you know, pointing to the process of thinking. So when we talk about spirituality, I believe that spirituality should be an enlightened spirituality and not one walking in the darkness.
And as the law says in the Quran, that of the ruh, we know very little.
Yes.
We know very little. So the focus of the Quran is not to engage human being in spiritual exercises. No, just as you referenced those ayah that talks about reflecting on the different signs that Allah gives you throughout the material creation. Well, that is every aspect of the creation is a message that Allah wants us to examine and to see its benefit for human society. See, I believe that one of the areas I think that we have really not exert our Quranic and Islamic understanding is in the area of applying the Quran to human problems. There's no human problem that does not have a Quranic solution, but we have to be willing to look deeply. That the term you use, yatafakkarun, that just don't mean thinking. It means think deeply. I mean, very deeply. I mean, it's just a double reflective a word that you say in Arabic. It's fair. You got to, if you think you got the answer, think again, go even deeper, because you will not be able to exhaust the wisdom that Allah has put in every ayah in both the Quran and in material creation. So here, the human society, for example, human society now, we are struggling with this virus, but there's obviously a solution. At some point, we're going to come to a solution. All right. Now, so the dua of the believers is that the scientific community, the people of ilm, knowledge, science, find this solution. But the Quran begins by saying Allah has taught the human being what he was not knowing. All right. This in the first revelation. So if we make the dua that Allah bless the scientific community, if we come together from around the world, the best minds, not working as from a nationalistic standpoint, but from a human standpoint, because everybody's impacted. So you see how Allah is using something as unseen as the virus to make humanity come back to a sense of commonality. This is strictly from the Quran. The law in the Quran is very clear that humanity was once one nation.
Right. Very, very nice comment. And I would like to connect it also with another dimension of yatafakkarun. We as Muslims are not Muslims unless we all subscribe to one basic principle, which is Tawheed. And we know so that God is the master of the universe, and we are equal before him. We are only distinguished by taqwa. Something that God decides, not us. But because God is the master of the universe, in some ways, some things might look to us as accidental, and they are not. So one might wonder, and I've seen this in many of the messages amongst Muslims and other people of faith in the community, like, why are we being visited by this virus? And so some people draw out of it moral lessons, things about getting us by force to be together with our families, to live a life of family and to enjoy our families. And some took other kinds of messages out of the situation. What I'm trying to underline in what you said is that there are many levels of thinking, even of the same issue, some even scientific, some moral, some even on the moral level, there are different depths, and the same thing on the technological levels and so on. In my view, having read a lot about that, one could also say that, you might open a Sufi book and you might find it to be highly spiritual in ways you don't comprehend, but you feel and you follow. But these people did not, the true Sufis, did not reach this level of comprehension without going through the ladder of rationality. In other words, they had to understand the Quran rationally and go deeper into its messages until they reached a depth which the others have not reached. And that's why I would call, and I'd like to comment on that, that's Sufism and other spiritual, approaches in Islam that are properly reflective of Islam are post-rational, not pre-rational.
Yes. Well, let me say is that it's a human trait that whenever things are really overbearing and almost sometimes incomprehensible, we tend to retreat to the spiritual world. However, in Islam, the idea of a person becoming, we use the term Sufi, is not someone who is just coming from an irrational base. You have to first have solid foundation in Islamic thinking and Islamic sciences. And then once you reach that level where you realize that there is a higher reality referred to as the spiritual realm, but you don't really, it's different from a person just having a good feeling about, let's say, the Quran. No, it's not a feeling. It is an understanding that of all we know, Allah knows best. But that means you got to first know what you know, and also know that you don't know everything. And that's submission, but it's based on a rational base. A good example is when we see Allah gives us a sign in the birth of a new baby. A new baby wants substance, physical substance, to first survive. All right. So Allah placed the baby in an environment where the mother gives the new baby physical substance. Now, over time, as the baby grows up, become an adult, he learns different things. She learns different things. That then they can experiment with the idea of say spirituality, what we call it Sufism, whatever. But look how many years they spent attached to the material world, because that's where we are to find, the law says of Adam, you are to find your means of livelihood in this material world. But the more we learn about the material world, there are glimpses, yes, of there's another world or another reality. But the reality that we begin with and that we grow in is first the material world. And too many people, especially in the people of faith, have allowed themselves to not keep that balance. Well, let me explain what I mean.
Yes.
You have people who have you think that a material, like wealth, is somehow is haram. All right, but yet, in order to achieve the life that Allah intends for us, He gives us a whole material universe, and He says He is sakara ash-shamsi wa qamar. He has made subservient or useful to you whatever's in the heavens and whatever's in the earth. All right. So if these things, if this material universe, and Allah says also in the Quran that He has made the paradise, the garden, as an expanse of the heavens and the earth. All right. So our first area of development is the material creation that leads us, that inspires us to know that there is a greater reality behind this. But you can't really appreciate the next level of human existence in terms of the spirituality until you first appreciate this reality. It's like you giving your child a gift, and you say, well, if you take this gift, I'm gonna give you another one. But they don't take that. They don't use that gift. They're waiting on the next one.
That leads me to the what is called the Madaris al-Atiqa, or the traditional ancient schools that they have established recently in Morocco, in which part of teaching Islam is to teach all the modern stuff about the world and science and technology and so on, and also teach the traditional sciences of the religion. And graduates of these schools are doing extremely well in the world. So to turn back as a final discussion of our interview today, how do we benefit from everything we said so far to discuss how should the Clara Muhammad school system look like in the future in terms of this discussion?
Well, I want to go back to the models that we saw in Morocco. I thought was very key. And I want to point to something that I, as a teacher, also as one who's concerned about the Islamic leadership being able to make a honorable living. Remember, in the schools we saw, I recall them also having what we refer to here in America as shops. The young people are learning skills like plumbing, electrical, and I remember that, a balance. And I think one of the teachers that I asked him, he said that he didn't want a lot of the imams that were leaving would go back to the African villages, whatever, and they had to be able to earn a living while they taught the religion. I think that this sometimes is missed, but also here in America, we miss the fact that our imams cannot just rely on sadaqah, contribution from the community. No, I think that this Moroccan model, for me, really very key.
You're talking now about the institute that prepares imams, and they came from all over. They come from all over Africa.
All over Africa, yes.
And you mentioned women. Women are called murshidat. And yes, and they are also educated similarly. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly, because they have shops where both the men and women learn a skill that they can make a living while they're teaching a religion. This is something that sometimes is missed today. We see, if you just have an academic, but like a person goes to school and he gets an academic degree, but if he don't go to college, what can he do? If a person goes through high school, but also learn a skill that he or she can make a honorable living, that's the type of balanced education I think that's needed today. You just can't have intellectual development without having the means of taking care of yourself and your family. Now, I'm pointing out this model because here in America, I've seen so many times where very learned brothers and sisters, especially the brothers, our imams, become very learned, but they don't have that other balance. That they don't have the tools or the skill set necessary to earn a living. So therefore, so they live a life of self-imposed poverty. And that's not the way of Islam. Islam don't want you to deny your share of this material reality. And if you really want to develop an educational system, you must focus in on not only giving the person the Quranic tools, the tools of the prophetic traditions, the language, but you also must give him or her tools where they can make a honorable living. So that means when they're teaching the religion, that they're not being influenced by those who have the wealth, and they have to kind of teach to appease those who are maintaining their livelihood. I've seen that as a big problem, especially here in the West, wherein those who have material wealth influence the decisions within many of our institutions, because the imams rely on contributions for their livelihood. Whereas I think this model that we saw in Morocco would alleviate that. So as the person is learning the Quranic sciences, the sciences of the religion, the sciences of the Arabic language, and they'll also be learning some type of skill. And I think that the climate must have something like that, I think.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that also research in academia is influenced by attitudes in academia. And so,
that's right.
Your research might be judged as valuable or not, depending on these attitudes, and therefore your livelihood or tenure might be based on it. So it's interesting that you're articulating this model in connection with an Islamic school system, such as the KARAMAH school system, where a person will do various other things, but when they come to talk about Islam, they have the freedom to teach without having to appease some other party that would judge them differently, such as also the grantors that you're talking about and financial supporters. But the point is that even in academia, this happens.
But that's why I think I don't know whether I elaborate on this. When we looked at the early thinkers and I'll say the early fuqaha, they were multitasking. They wouldn't just say imams. They were also mathematicians and physicians. They were not just one. They were not just academians. They were also men and women who had other skills. I think that sometimes is lost when we look at our great tradition of the great scholars that we've had in the past, they had a multiplicity of skills.
This is a great point you make. And
yeah.
We've lost a little bit of the sound. So let me see.
Okay, it's back now.
It is back. Okay. So this is a great point you make. And I think this is wonderful about ensuring that the teachers who are learned are not being pressured by outside forces, including the force of poverty. But let's talk about then what would you think is a balanced curriculum on the inside of the school?
Well, obviously, the base of it, and that will permeate through all the subjects, will be the Quranic base. But not only will they study the Quran and the Quranic Arabic as subjects of in themselves, but I think the curriculum itself, if I'm studying science, I should have a Quranic base to that. You know, or the ayah in the Quran that will guide science, mathematics, anatomy, physics, chemistry. Right? I'm studying these sciences. Yes, I'm studying home economics, how to manage all these things. I can find as a base something from the Quran. I'm studying the Quran. Yes, I'm studying the Quran and the language, the Quranic Arabic. But I'm also the curriculum is infused with the Quranic knowledge of that particular subject.
And you know, that's the model of the ancient schools, Islamic schools that are established in Morocco. And what I like is that, and we need to remind the students that they're not coming at something which is so strange to them, and there is a division between that and what they're studying in terms of religion. To the contrary, it is the people who established chemistry and physics and many aspects of these sciences in medieval times were Muslims inspired by the Quran. And so the faith and the technology and the knowledge were all fused together. And we need to make our contribution today by fusing them again.
Well, that goes back to the fundamental basis of our religion. Our religion is based on oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Tawheed, but that Tawheed extends to knowledge. It extends to humanity. See, we don't have different knowledges. We don't have, all knowledge is one as long as it's beneficial, right? And so when we set up a curriculum, it must conform to that idea that the knowledge belongs to Allah that elevates the human life, but it's one. It's not actually. It's not secular knowledge and religious knowledge. We don't have that division in our thinking. We look at find if we look at I would call the Quranic sciences, they would be the same if I looked at academic sciences, because the Quran has a view on, say, technology. So I'm looking at technology, which is the application of knowledge. Well, knowledge begins with what Allah has revealed. And whether it's in the book of the Quran or it's in the book of the universe, it's still a ayah, science.
You know, we know the Arabs came out of the desert in Jahiliyyah society to become the leading civilization in the world based on these understandings. Of the depth of the Quran and its relationship to nature and humanity and so on. I think this is a wonderful idea to end our conversation on. I would like you to make a final statement and thank you very much.
Well, I hope and pray that we, in this time, will pick up that legacy that you just referred to, and that we will see a renaissance, a revival of human life. I think coming out of the current state that human civilization is in, I think Islam has a very, very critical role to play to bring back that balance, to bring the technology and the spirituality back together, using the Quranic insights. That's our prayer, that we see that Allah Most High giving us the guidance. All we got to do is take that guidance and go forward to, once again, bring human civilization, no matter whether it's east or west, back to where Allah wants us to go. That's our hope, is to have that development coming out of this present state that humanity finds itself in.
Inshallah, I think this is a great message to end on, and I wish you all the success for your vision for the future, and inshallah we'll continue collaborating with each other and moving forward. So thank you. Wassalamu alaikum.